Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm just going to give it another second or two to let everyone into the webinar. So just hold on another minute. Still have a few people coming in. All right, I think we'll start. So good afternoon, everyone. We are just super excited to have you all participating in Keela's 3-day virtual conference that we're calling Plugged In. If you attended our morning session so far, welcome back. And if you're just tuning in now, welcome and thanks for joining us. So before we begin this session, just a few housekeeping details to go over. So first, this Lunch and Learn session will be about 30 minutes in length, which also includes about a 5 to 10 minute Q&A session at the end. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation though, and put it in the Q&A box, and then we'll get to them all once the session is done. We also just a reminder also that the sessions will be recorded and you'll be receiving the recording along with the slide deck by the end of this week. All right, and with that, I'd like to introduce our two speakers for today's Lunch and Learn. So first we have Peter Craigen, who is the Senior Account Executive here at Keela. And then we also have Lee Sutton, who is the Head of Intelligence at Keela. They'll be leading today's Lunch and Learn session and it's called AI for the Little Guy, the 4 Stages of Data Literacy. Thank you so much, guys, and I'll pass it off to you now.
Amazing. Mel, thank you so much for that introduction. Clearly, plane tickets are very cheap. Nice to see that you've been traveling. Just kidding, for anyone out there that can see Mel's background. Totally done with AI there. Now, I wanted to first start out by saying thank you everyone for joining today. We're super excited to get going with this session. And we're going to start out with a brief introduction. And then we'll discuss what those 4 stages of data literacy are. And then we're going to jump right into our Keela's actual platform. We'll go through a few real-life examples. We'll talk a bit about how Keela uses the different stages of data literacy and really how you can get from stage 1, 2, 3, all the way to the 4th. And then we'll finish off with a conclusion in that quick 5 to 10 minute Q&A at the end. Now, I know what you're thinking already. Oh, geez, here we go again with another underqualified, whoever giving a talk about AI, data, and nonprofits. Maybe you've heard a similar talk before, or maybe you don't even know what AI is. That's artificial intelligence, by the way. But given this was supposed to be an N10 presentation, I'm guessing that maybe you have heard this one before. But really, instead of listening to me, I managed to wrangle one of our head developers and the head of intelligence at Keela, who is a lot more poised to give this talk than I am. It's a huge win for me because it actually means less PowerPoint slides on my end, and now I can certainly dodge those pesky technical questions at the end of the presentation. So, big relief for me. But in all seriousness, we did want to showcase a major challenge that a lot of nonprofits have faced historically and what Keela is doing about it. Now, there's always been this huge gap in the technology available for nonprofits compared to our friends in the for-profit sector. The big budgets of Fortune 500 companies attract tech companies to sell fancy, high-priced solutions that promote things like forecasting, data analysis, predictive analytics, and really these tools ultimately influence the strategies that these companies are able to use for their own missions, whether or not you agree with those missions. Now, unfortunately, I'm sure that many of you in our audience today have probably had maybe the opposite experience. How many people here have been told, we don't have a budget for new technology? Or when you finally get approval for that fancy nonprofit specific database, perhaps it feels maybe a few years behind the systems that you used to use in your for-profit job. So that's really the problem that we've set out to solve at Keela. And the issue isn't whether nonprofit leaders are capable or smart enough or technically savvy. Instead, this is really an issue of access to technology. And so today we're going to talk about how we as a community can bring access to these powerful tools to organizations of all sizes. And so without me wasting any more of your precious time, I'm going to introduce Lee Sutton, Keela's head of intelligence, to talk about the 4 stages of data literacy.
Thanks for the intro, Pete, and thanks everyone for joining us today. As Peter alluded to, today we're here to talk about data literacy and how that enables organizations to make informed, data-driven decisions. Now, to become data literate, we've defined these 4 incremental stages. To start with, there's the baseline level. With this level of data literacy, you're able to answer the following questions. Did a donation happen? Was a receipt issued? Did this person volunteer? Now, Keela helps organizations with this by providing an easy way to consolidate your information. Taking this one step further, you're able to answer the question, what actually happened? Now, with this level of data literacy, you're able to answer these following questions. How many donations did we bring in last month? Which campaign performed the best? How many of our contacts are volunteers? Now, Keela's analytics and reporting tools can help you answer these questions. Going one step further, we have the diagnostic stage of data literacy. Now, with this level of literacy, you're able to answer the question why something actually happened. So for example, why did your spring fundraising campaign perform better last year? Why was this month's email campaign more effective than last month's? Now, finally, we're on to the last level of data literacy, and this is the predictive. So this is being able to answer the question, what is going to happen? So for example, how many donations can we expect next month? Which donors are likely to donate this month? How many volunteers can we expect at our upcoming event? And how much are donors likely to give? Now, with all that being said, this is not to say that organizations aren't data literate. Many organizations are actively using data to make informed decisions. Our goal was to make this process easier and more accessible. Anytime we built a feature, it had to help at least with one of these stages of data literacy. Now I'm going to pass it off to Peter, and he's going to demo some of these features.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the explanation there, Lee. So I'm going to actually pull Keela over here, and we should be looking at everything okay there. Let's take a quick peek there. Awesome. So we're actually going to dive right into the platform here, and we're going to take a look at some examples of how we have helped organizations hit that first, second, third, and fourth level of data literacy. So without any further ado, let's actually jump right into contacts here and take a peek at an example. We're going to look at the first feature here that we call insights. And insights are informative metrics to help you make better decisions about your donors. These little nuggets of wisdom are built on the back of machine learning algorithms to really help you better understand your individual donors, as well as to compare and benchmark your donor base as a whole. For example, an insight like donor score here actually is calculated based on how long a donor has been giving and how much they have donated over time, and then comparing those numbers to other donors in your system. So you can already see that this takes a donor from it takes an organization from the baseline and hindsight level all the way into those third and fourth stages, the diagnostic, and potentially even with something like donor readiness or the SMART ask into the predictive stage. Now, I know these are some very uncertain times for a lot of folks, and this is the type of tool that someone like a development director might actually look to in order to determine who are my highest scoring donors, who are the folks that are most likely to support us during a difficult time. Using a tool like Donor Score can help you achieve that. Now, the next area we want to jump into is right underneath the fundraising tab here, and we're going to take a look at benchmarks. So I'm going to scroll down here, Hopefully everyone can see these key performance indicators here, these KPIs. So benchmarks bring organizations directly into the predictive and diagnostic stages of data literacy without having to spend hours in the baseline or hindsight stages of manually logging or sifting through information. Many organizations spend countless hours calculating things like donor retention rates as part of their annual forecasts or maybe for a board meeting. Others may actually struggle to pull an accurate number sometimes or don't even have a calculated donor retention rate at all. And that's often because of the lack of time or even just the lack of quality data to begin with. So benchmarking in Keela ensures that the data that you did log into the system will provide you with quality and consistent reporting. So you can focus on how to get these numbers up, how to get your 1-year retention rate up or your acquisition rate up, instead of spending your whole day, juggling through these spreadsheets. Now, you can take a look at something like this benchmark here, and this will actually compare your KPIs and your retention rates against organizations that are using Keela in a similar size bracket and a similar impact area. And so hopefully that can help situate where you actually stand. And the final tool that we want to take a look at today is our fundraising report. This is a new feature launched by Keela in the last couple weeks. So for those of you on our 2.0 system, you'll notice up at the top of fundraising here, when you click on the fundraising report, this is going to calculate every single data point that you've put into the system since you began with Keela. And it may take a few seconds to download here, just because it is a pretty big report there, but I'm going to pull it up here. And this is going to provide a 20-page PDF document. I'll pull that over for us here. That breaks down every single data point we've ever put into the system. So within the fundraising report, we're going to see things like total donation histories, gift sizes, breakdowns on recurring donors, and acquisition and retention rates. Now, the fundraising report will really change the way that fundraising departments operate entirely. Keela has a lot of customized reports, which are great, but sometimes having all of those dashboards or smart lists or reports can sometimes get lost in the minutia. And so the fundraising report is a single click view of every single piece of data you've ever logged into the system. So let's take a look in here and actually take a peek at what we're looking at. Total donation history year over year. I've got from 2016 all the way to 2020. Quarterly donation breakdowns or monthly gifts year over year, broken down with the individual data sets as well as some visuals for you to share, all the way into things like comparing impact areas or campaign performance. I can then take a look at things like my recurring donations. In this example, I see that I have 99% of my donors coming in as one-time supporters. That is a huge opportunity for me, especially when I notice that my average gift size for those recurring donors, those 2 recurring donors I have, is actually quite large. So this brings me right into that third stage. I know what's happening, and I think I might know why it's happening. And so ultimately, we want to use this to predict what strategies we can use going forward. You'll also see things like gift sizes over time and all the way into a few other items, especially on the recurring gifts. The retention and acquisition is especially one of the areas that can be incredibly challenging for organizations to report on, because it often does require sifting or cross-referencing a lot of older information. And quite frankly, a lot of folks just don't have that time. So you can certainly see things like this donor acquisition over time. You can tell that I'm going to have an issue in 2021 if I haven't acquired any new donors and I'm still relying on these older ones. And so ultimately, the idea of having this type of standardized report means that every single year, your report will be tied to the previous year's results, keeping things much more consistent. Now, I hope that was a nice walkthrough and everyone had a chance to take a peek in there. We're actually going to jump back into our presentation here, and we're going to pass it back off to Lee for a quick conclusion there.
Thanks for the demo, Pete. And as Peter alluded to, the goal of this presentation was to really talk about what we defined as the 4 stages of data literacy and how Keela enables organizations to more easily become data literate. We also wanted to provide you with some real-world examples. There have been a lot of talks about how AI is going to impact the sector, but we wanted to supplement that with some more tangible features. Of course, it has its limitations, and it can never replace our users. It can suggest the most rational decision, but it cannot replace a human who makes decisions based on way more factors. But it certainly can take the intensive data analytics work off of our customers' shoulders. We like to think of Keela as the organization's assistant or the organization's data scientist, but ultimately it's the user who makes the decision. And lastly, I wanted to let everyone know this is just the beginning. We have an ambitious roadmap moving forward, and we're always looking to push the boundaries of what is possible, ultimately bringing you more intelligent tools so you can focus on what you do best.
Amazing. Lee, thank you so much for that. And it's always incredible to hear from the team that built the entire product. So really, really appreciative. Now, we'd love to open up the floor to questions. So if anyone was curious during the presentation, if there was something that we went over quickly, or if there were any particular questions that we can help with, we'd love to open up that floor. Feel free to pop a question directly in the chat, and Mel, I'll pass it off to you if you'd like to moderate there.
Absolutely. So we have a question coming in from Phil, and he's asking, what kind of implications does this have on things like data privacy? So of your users and potentially of the donors themselves. Can you talk a little bit more about the privacy? That would be great.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one if you'd like. Now, data privacy is something that we take incredibly seriously here at Keela. Ensuring that we are, collecting this data in a responsible manner and in a way that aligns with, the values of our society is incredibly important. So there are a number of things that we do to ensure that, and a few that maybe Leah, I might have you actually elaborate on how our developers actually do it. But the first is that every single data point that you put into Keela is your own. We don't own that information. You retain the rights to it. At the same time, when we do things like run a large report or benchmark or compare other organizations' data, everything is completely anonymized. When we aggregate data to say that on average, a human services nonprofit is likely to have a donor retention rate of X or Y. All of that information is completely anonymized. So we make sure that not only are we keeping your donors' information safe and secure, that's yours, you own it, we don't have access to things like, Oprah Winfrey's email, but we're making sure that we do it in a responsible manner as well. So Lee, I don't know if you have anything that you want to add to that in terms of the way that you work with some of this data, but that's how we as a company align, and that's how we tackle that ongoing responsibility of ours.
Yeah, that was well said, Pete. I don't know if I have a lot to add, but I will say, you guys have probably heard machine learning AI, it does take a lot of data. And with that requirement, within Keela, you sort of get what you put in. So you put in a lot of data, chances are you're going to have better predictions, better insights. And the reason is we only really run these predictions, these insights on your data. We keep that data private, we keep it anonymous just for your organization. There are other sources of data that we might pull in, but that would be publicly available data. Things like weather is actually sort of a good indicator of when someone's likely to donate. People like it when it's sunny. Public statistics data or census data, that might also be an indicator of what locations are good for targeting certain campaigns. But again, all the data that we use is your data, anonymized, and that's sort of how we make the predictions there.
Great. Thank you so much, you guys. Really well said, and thank you for the responses. We have an anonymous question. So someone is asking, what are some of the exciting things coming up in terms of AI for Keela?
I guess I can speak a little bit to that one. I don't want to go on the record and make any promises because a big thing that we do like to, we really like to listen to our users. We want feedback, and if they ask for things, we really want to be able to build that for them. But with that being said, if you were to ask me where I think this could go, there's definitely a few directions. One is we focused a lot on fundraising so far, but I'd like to put more emphasis on human capital. So volunteering, who's likely to volunteer, who's your best volunteers, who are most engaged with your organization. Those are really important insights that I think we can get from your data. Another one would be interactions data. So e-blasts, click rates. I think there's a lot more we can learn about how you engage with your donors through interactions. Now, I don't want to make any promises, but to me, that's the sort of direction that excites me. But again, of course, we're going to listen to our users because ultimately we want to build what they want. Peter, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, certainly. I think, again, Lee, I think you covered our bases there. We certainly don't want to make sweeping promises there, but as you mentioned, this is only the beginning. This is the direction that we are continuing to go as a company, and we have some lots of exciting changes upcoming in the future in that direction. I guess that's pretty vague, but that's what we'll keep it to for now.
Thanks so much, guys. So we have a question from Moni, and she's asking, what reports or information do you recommend to provide to the board monthly or quarterly? I know that's not really an AI question, but I don't know if you had any insights on that.
Yeah. So I'm happy to speak on that. I think, although I'm not an executive director, or well, I'm a board member in some senses, but having spoken to hundreds, if not thousands, of development directors, executive directors, I've certainly heard a lot of challenges when it comes to what we need to report to the board, as well as what the board is actually asking for. Now, it's important to note that every single organization is different. And so the key metrics that you may be reporting on may be completely different. For you, it may be the number of folks going through your programs, the number of new donors in a month, the amount, if you're a primarily fundraising based organization, maybe you support a library, how much money did we raise for the library that month? Those are all going to be key metrics. The point is to find those key metrics and to keep them consistent so that you can see growth month over month, year over year, and identify those trends. The most important aspect isn't necessarily fitting into a one-size-fits-all strategy for reporting. It's being able to identify those trends. So in some ways, finding those, there are lots of key metrics that may apply to a lot of folks. Donor retention rate and new donor acquisition is a really important one for anyone who works in a fundraising department. But the real important area is to ensure that you are identifying trends, finding things that we like to call leading indicators and lagging indicators. So a leading indicator is going to tell you, well, if I acquired 20 new donors this month or this quarter, we expect a better turnout at our gala or at our annual appeal. Where the lagging indicators might tell you something like, if we didn't have many new donors added, we don't expect a very good turnout. And so it's important to ensure that you are measuring those metrics that make the most sense for your organization, because again, each org is different, but identifying trends, and that's really the most important thing, that you can show whether things are going up or down or straight across, and hopefully everything is up and to the right, but we want to help you get there.
Wonderful. Thanks, Pete. I think we have time for one or two more questions more. So this next question is from Jessica. She's saying, you mentioned that donor score is calculated based on a number of factors. So I believe this was you, Pete, that was talking. Other than donation amounts, she's saying, what factors actually go into calculating it?
So that is a great question. And Lee, I would say you're probably best suited to answer this one.
Yeah, fair enough. That is a great question. Thank you for asking that. So donor score is strictly a fundraising metric. So it's really how long has this person been contributing, how consistently have they been contributing, and how much have they been contributing over their lifetime with your organization. We then go one step further and sort of group everybody in your org into 3 categories. So you've got sort of the most engaged, or your champions, those that are loyal, so sort of in the middle, and those that we say maybe need a little more love, or who have been less consistent with their giving over time. So it's really those 3 big factors: how long they've been contributing for, the amount, how consistent, and we could actually go one step further, whether or not that amount is increasing or decreasing. If the amount that they give is constantly increasing over time, the donor score would increase as well. Yeah.
Wonderful, thanks. All right, there's time for probably one more question. So it's an anonymous one, and they're asking, how do you define similar organizations in your benchmarking? I believe that was maybe Pete that was talking about the benchmarking aspect.
Yeah, happy to kind of take a little bit of that. And then Lee, again, I promised I was going to be passing off the technical ones on your side. So some of that is coming from publicly available data, things like registries or government databases of similar nonprofits. But Lee, maybe I'll pass it off to you to kind of explain how we actually built that out on a technical sense.
Yeah, exactly. Great question. So it comes down to those NTEE codes that classify the nonprofit organizations. So that data is publicly available. We grab that, we're able to group organizations in the same cause area together and calculate those KPIs and benchmarks.
Great, thank you so much. And I know we said there was room for one more, but there's actually been a really good question that's come in, and so I'll ask it as well. It's an anonymous one again. So they're saying, someone who doesn't have a CRM, and if they were to start using Keela, how long would it take to have these analysis, or to be able to, see what the donor score is?
Yeah, great question. So I guess there's sort of two ways to onboard with Keela. If you just sign up and you don't have any data right now, we'd have to wait until you get some donations coming in. We sort of define it as a minimum of at least 30 or 40 donations and 30 or 40 contacts to at least be statistically significant. But a lot of people are coming to Keela with data in a spreadsheet. They're importing their data into Keela. And if that's the case, you should get them right away, or at least within a day. It takes a little while for us to process the data. So you import your data, you can expect by tomorrow you're going to have all these insights just about ready to go. Yeah.
Great. Well, all right, I think that will conclude today's session. So thank you all so much for the thoughtful questions and insightful learnings today. Just a reminder that our next session will start at 1 p.m. PST, or that's 4 p.m. EST today, so in about 30 minutes. This session will be led by Beth Cantor and Miko Whitlock, and they'll be speaking on mindfulness, happiness, and well-being. There's an app for that. If you haven't already registered for that, I will post a link in the chat box, which I'm going to do right now. And yeah, we are super excited to see you there. And thanks again, everyone. I don't know, Pete or Lee, if you had any final words that you wanted to say before we sign off, but you can have the floor for that.
Just wanted to say thank you all for joining. I hope everyone is staying safe out there. We really appreciate such an incredible response to a difficult time these days. So stay positive, everyone, and thanks so much for joining.
Well said, Pete. I'll just reflect that and say again, thanks everyone for joining. Please stay healthy out there. And it was really exciting to see this many people joining on. So thanks again. Super exciting to see that interest.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Wonderful. Bye, everyone.